Ajua knew the feel of Accra's dust better than her own skin. It settled on her bright yellow cleaning uniform as she swept the polished marble floors of the Koala shopping center, a quiet, tireless woman in a bustling city. Her true scandal, however, wasn't her poverty, but her choice in company. Kwesi wasn't just poor, he was an empty, forgotten thing, a scruffy, homeless man who slept near the loading docks. Every morning, Ajua shared her wache and shielded him from the market women's scorn. "Ajua, are you a fool?" her best friend, ESI, had warned. "You clean up after rich men, only to marry the refuse they discard." The woman's laughter was a sharp, daily wound, echoing their belief that Ajua was sealing her own fate to misery. She simply smiled. Kwesi had eyes that held the quiet, vast depth of the Atlantic, and a dignity that no grime could mask. He spoke little, but when he did, his voice carried an education that surprised her. He was her secret, her quiet love, what the laughing women, and even Ajua, couldn't know was the cruel and gilded game they were all players in. They laughed at her for marrying a beggar, failing to see the truth. Kwesi was not a beggar. He was the sole heir to the immense Upper Danko commodities empire, one of West Africa's biggest fortunes, and his homelessness was a calculated costume. He was running from a betrayal so deep, only a cleaner who saw past the dirt could be trusted. He had found his price. But soon, Ajua would discover that marrying the diamond only exposed her to the cutthroat greed of its previous owners, leading to a silence more chilling than any street gossip. The wedding was a spectacle of pity. Ajua, glowing despite her borrowed white lace dress, felt the weight of judgment from the few market women who attended, their eyes darting from her to Kwesi's meticulously cleaned, threadbare suit. ESI, though reluctantly a bridesmaid, couldn't mask her contempt. "You have signed your poverty contract in church, Ajua," she whispered, adjusting her silken sash. "You had a chance." Kwesi, however, stood taller than a king, his bearing precise, his smile radiant and focused only on Ajua. As they signed the registry, he produced a pen she didn't recognize, heavy, gold-plated, and expensive-looking, quickly tucked away once used. Later that evening, in Ajua's cramped, single room near OSU, Kwesi didn't touch her. Instead, he pulled a small, worn photograph from his pocket, his face hardening with a silent, profound anger Ajua had never witnessed. It was a picture of a breathtakingly beautiful woman, Akosua, posed beside a massive yacht docked in Tima. "She planned my burial, but forgot the funeral," he finally muttered, his voice cold still. "She betrayed me for the Opiadanko fortune, believing me dead after an accident she orchestrated. My father's will stated I must be married and of sound mind to inherit. She didn't account for a ghost finding a true wife." Ajua realized the game was far bigger than gold. It was a chilling act of revenge. Kwesi was not just a billionaire, he was a betrayed phantom, using her as a shield and a key to reclaim his inheritance. The laughter of the market women now sounded hollow, replaced by the ominous silence of a trap closing shut around a different kind of prey. The night after the wedding, Ajua was ushered into a life that was dizzying and unreal. Kwesi purchased a penthouse apartment overlooking the city, replacing her uniform with gowns that shimmered like the oil wealth his family controlled. He taught her how to navigate cutlery and conversation, molding her into the perfect, polished wife required by the will. The final step was announcing his return. One scorching Thursday, a sleek black Mercedes-Benz pulled up to the Upper Danko Global Headquarters in Accra's Cantonment District. Kwesi, now clean-shaven, impeccably suited, and radiating little confidence, led Ajua inside. The foyer was silence and marble. Akojua, draped in tailored designer silk and chairing an emergency board meeting, froze when she saw him. Her face went from pale shock to a mask of ice-cold composure. She hadn't just betrayed Kwesi, she was living in his house, controlling his assets, and wearing his mother's diamond necklace. Kwesi. You're alive, she managed, her voice dangerously thin. Kwesi's gaze was utterly devoid of warmth. More than alive, Akojua. And married, as there were demands. Meet my wife, Ajua Opadankwa. Akojua's eyes swept over Ajua's simple, elegant dress, missing nothing, especially the lack of expensive jewelry. She forced a dazzling, predatory smile. A cleaner, Kwesi. You married a cleaner. How deliciously low. But beneath the venomous laugh, a calculated hunger began to burn. Ajua was the weak link. Akojua would break her to take the fortune back. The war for the empire had begun, fought not with documents, but with desire and deceit. Akojua, banished from the boardroom but not from the social circles, launched her campaign with surgical precision. She knew Kwesi was protected by the legal marriage, but Ajua was a soft target. Akojua's first move was to appear generous, hosting a "Welcome to the Family" gala, making sure Ajua was introduced to across most venomous society hostesses. Ajua felt suffocated by the expensive air and the eyes that stripped her bare. They laughed openly at her simple, quiet answers and her inability to hold a conversation about foreign stocks or Parisian fashion. Akojua watched, a viper preparing its strike, knowing public humiliation was the fastest way to break her spirit. The real poison came through ESI. Akojua, knowing ESI's deep-seated envy of Ajua's sudden wealth, sought her out discreetly at the market. A quiet, calculated conversation, a promise of a small business loan and a generous monthly stipend, secured ESI's willing loyalty. ESI was instructed to continue her friendship with Ajua, but now as Akojua's spy, feeding information about Ajua's insecurities and Kwesi's private movements. Kwesi, consumed by reclaiming control of his empire's finances and board seats, barely noticed Ajua's increasing isolation. He saw her struggles as necessary growing pains. One night, Ajua overheard Kwesi on a phone call, his voice distant. Yes, the marriage is purely contractual, father. She is a means to an end. Ajua's world tilted. Kwesi had loved her, hadn't he? She was the key, the true wife, but was she only the key? The chilling question echoed, how much of his affection was a calculated costume, just like his rags? ESI arrived the following day, smelling faintly of an expensive new perfume, which Ajua, blinded by her pain and the luxury surrounding her, attributed to ESI's fabricated business success. This place is too big, my sister, ESI said, her eyes calculating the worth of every object. Where does Kwesi keep his accounts? The money that makes all this. Ajua, distracted by the echoing words of the contractual marriage, vaguely pointed toward Kwesi's private office, which was always secured with a digital lock. While Ajua was in the kitchen preparing a traditional Ghanaian meal, ESI quickly slipped back. She focused on the keypad, photographing the slight discoloration around the 4 buttons most frequently touched. Akojua received the image immediately. She now had a significant vulnerability, the possible code combination for Kwesi's most sensitive legal papers. Akojua's next instruction to ESI was simple: find a copy of the will and confirm the exact duration of the mandated marriage. Kwesi, meanwhile, was preparing to execute his first major retaliatory stock maneuver against the assets Akojua had been hoarding. He desperately needed Ajua to attend a major charity ball in East Legon to project an image of undeniable domestic stability, Kwesi presented Ajua with a necklace and earring set, priceless emeralds, cold stones that only emphasized the chilling distance between them. Ajua accepted the jewels, her heart heavy with the truth she overheard. She realized her love was a secondary issue, her presence was paramount. A growing, dangerous affinity for the power these secrets wielded began to replace her innocence. The diamonds may have been cold, but they offered a fiery strength she hadn't known she possessed. The charity ball at the opulent East Legan estate shimmered with Accra's false gold. Ajua wore the emeralds, but they felt like chains as society matrons appraised her with cold curiosity. Kwesi, focused on leveraging his social appearance to pressure investors, left Ajua momentarily alone near the silent auction tables. This was Akojua's cue. She approached, her smile a beautiful, chilling curve. "You look lovely, Ajua. You've settled in nicely to Kwesi's temporary arrangement." Ajua stiffened. "It is not temporary, Akojua. We are married." Akojua leaned closer, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper, dripping with false sympathy. "Oh, sweet child. You truly believe he chose you over the legacy?" "Kwesi told me everything. He needed a wife, anyone, to satisfy the 2-year clause in his father's will to reclaim control from me. He's already set aside a very generous stipend for you once the mandatory time is up, a payment for your services. He calls it his necessary sacrifice. He confessed he misses the real love he once had." Akojua punctuated the lie with a pitying sigh, her eyes conveying the venom ESI had fed her, that Ajua was a simple transaction. The lie landed perfectly, echoing Ajua's earlier fear from the overheard phone call. Kwesi's indifference at the ball, his focus purely on business, suddenly made brutal sense. Her heart shattered, replaced by a cold, sharp determination. If she was a means to an end, she would ensure her end was the most profitable. Kwesi returned, oblivious, placing a possessive hand on her shoulder. Ajua's smile was flawless, but her eyes, hidden by the emerald sparkle, were now calculating only her own survival. The silence of the mansion amplified the weight of Akojua's revelation. Ajua was a 2-year expiry date. The simple cleaner was gone, replaced by a calculating survivor whose heart had hardened into an emerald. Ajua traced the outline of the expensive perfume ESI had worn, linking the greed in ESI's eyes to Akojua's vindictive smile. She was being played, but she wouldn't be the casualty. Kwesi had used her, now she would use his enemies. Her first act of self-preservation was to turn the spy against the spymaster. Ajua knew ESI would return for more valuable information. She took a sheet of Kwesi's personal stationery and, mimicking his rapid scrawl, forged a cryptic note. It explained that Kwesi, having suspected Akojua's continued meddling, had not only changed the code to his private office but had also implemented a secondary layer of security linked to his family's offshore accounts. The note contained a convincing but entirely false sequence. She ended the fabrication with a chilling addendum: "Any attempt to use the previous code, or this one, will initiate a timed lockout and alert security." Ajua placed the document inside a brightly colored fashion magazine on the kitchen counter, knowing ESI couldn't resist. When Kwesi found Ajua late that night, she was no longer tearful. She was studying a finance journal with fierce concentration. He kissed her forehead, a customary, distant gesture. "You look determined, my dearest." Ajua looked up, her expression inscrutable. "I am learning, Kwesi. This world is complex, and I intend to be the one who controls the complexity." Her calm, cold response was unnerving, a small hint that the stakes had just been raised far beyond his understanding. Akojua, receiving the fabricated code from ESI, immediately saw a window of opportunity. She didn't trust ESI to perform the breach herself. The risk was too high. Instead, she contacted her longtime, discreet hacker, a professional known only as the Spider. Akojua provided the code and the location, Kwesi's private office in the mansion. The Spider, using a portable remote access device, attempted the sequence at 3 a.m., targeting the server hub. Kwesi's advanced security system, however, was designed to log multiple failed attempts from any external connection. The moment the Spider entered the forged sequence, a silent protocol activated, the system locked down the remote server connection and sent a brief, encrypted alert to Kwesi's phone, labeling it a Tier 3 brute force attempt. Kwesi awoke to the subtle vibration. He checked the alert, his eyes narrowing. The attempt had failed, but the location was specific. The genius of Ajua's forgery was that the code looked plausible, convincing Kwesi it must have originated from someone internal, perhaps ESI herself. Kwesi immediately assumed Akojua was testing his defenses again. The next morning, Kwesi stood by the safe, watching Ajua potty. "I had an attempted breach last night," he stated, his tone neutral. Ajua met his gaze, showing perfect, calculated surprise. "Here. Inside the walls." Kwesi nodded slowly. "A remote attempt on the main server hub. It failed immediately, thanks to the new firewall I installed." He looked at her, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes. "It seems your presence is creating the stability I require, Ajua. Keep being watchful." He left for the city, satisfied, but Ajua's mind raced. Kwesi credited the firewall, not her lie, but the result was the same. Akojua was momentarily locked out, and Kwesi was beginning to trust the cleaner wife. Now was the time to ask about his will. Ajua waited until the following evening when Kwesi was deeply engrossed in legal binders, preparing for a hostile takeover bid. She approached the study quietly, offering him a chilled glass of fresh palm wine. "My husband, you worked too hard. I am still thinking about that attempted breach." "Akojua will not stop trying to take what is yours," she murmured, smoothing the lapel of his silk robe. "I worry that if anything ever happened to you, she would tie up everything in court, even what you intended for the foundation." Kwesi smiled, taking her hand. "My thoughts exactly. My current will protect my interest, but it has a built-in time delay." Ajua tilted her head innocently. "A time delay. But security, true security, should be immediate. If Akojua's greed is this strong, shouldn't your immediate family be safeguarded right now?" "I do not want your money, Kwesi," she lied beautifully, pressing his palm to her heart. "But for the sake of the legacy and the children we will have, you should establish a separate, irrevocable trust. Something that exists outside the will, fully funded and immediately accessible to your spouse, effective today. It sends a message of strength." Kwesi looked at her, truly touched by what he perceived as selfless loyalty and smart intuition. He saw his unsophisticated cleaner wife rising to protect his empire, not just herself. "You are wiser than I gave you credit for, Ajua. A separate, irrevocable trust, brilliant. No 2-year clause, no delays. It's an immediate, concrete victory over Akojua." He made a note in the binder. Ajua bowed her head, concealing the triumphant glint in her eyes. The trust would achieve her goal, she would be secure, whether he tossed her out in 2 years or not. Akojua's revenge focused on public humiliation, not mere financial damage. She knew the elite of Accra already scoffed at Kwesi marrying a gutter girl. She planned to prove their low opinions correct. Akojua's greatest asset was an antique Colombian emerald necklace, a legendary piece worn only by the wives of the city's oldest money. She prepared for the annual Gold Coast Gala, where Ajoa and Kwesi were expected to make their grandest appearance yet. Akojoa arranged for the necklace to be momentarily lost from its secured display in her family's private museum, then, using the spider, manipulated the mansion's staff rotation software to assign the missing piece's last known storage cleaning, just before its disappearance, to Ajoa's old cleaning code. At the gala, Ajoa was a vision, adorned in authentic Ghanaian haute couture, walking beside Kwesi. Akojoa approached them with a strained, dramatic gasp. "Ajoa, my dear. I am so sorry, but I must speak to my husband. The unthinkable has happened, my mother's emerald is gone." The whispers started immediately. Akojoa then turned to Kwesi, feigning distress. "Kwesi, forgive me, but our security records show the last person who accessed that area was Ajoa. Her unique staff entry code." The crowd gasped. Kwesi looked at Ajoa, the tiny seed of doubt planted in his heart finally finding fertile ground. Akojoa had delivered the perfect blow, using Ajoa's past to taint her present. Back at the Accra mansion, the silence was suffocating, thick with expensive air conditioning and suspicion. Kwesi did not yell, he was worse, chillingly analytical. He looked at Ajoa with an awful, familiar coldness. "The cleaner's code, Ajoa." Akojoa knew the only way to cast doubt on you was to use your past against you. "Tell me, with absolute honesty, that you did not give her an opening." Ajoa swore it was Akojoa's scheme, detailing ESI's strange behavior, but Kwesi's eyes held the trauma of betrayal he'd suffered before. He knew Akojoa was capable of anything, yet the theft was too convenient, too perfect. Kwesi ordered his head of security, Kofi, to conduct a secret, untraceable audit of the cleaning staff access logs, specifically focusing on the moment the necklace was last seen. "Find proof that clears my wife, or confirms my fears," he instructed Kofi privately. Ajoa knew her protestations were useless. Kwesi's paranoia was his weakness, and she had to exploit it against his enemy. She sought out ESI, feigning utter distress. "ESI, Akojoa is framing me. But I just remembered something. Kwesi has a file hidden in his office that proves Akojoa was behind the first attempt on his life 2 years ago. Not the shooting, but the financial sabotage that almost ruined him." ESI, terrified of Akojoa's wrath following the security code failure, relayed the information immediately. Akojoa dismissed the emerald fiasco, focusing entirely on this rumored affair. If Ajoa was truly Kwesi's wife, she might know the location of such a thing. Akojoa's greed and need for absolute destruction were reignited by the promise of evidence that could finally crush her rival. She commanded ESI to find the file in the study that very night. This time, the theft wouldn't be fake. The expansive mansion was cloaked in artificial twilight, only the security lights cast long, silver streaks across the polished mahogany floors. Kwesi and Ajoa were ostensibly asleep, but Kwesi was secretly in the study, reviewing Kofi's initial, confusing security report. He heard the faint, rhythmic creak of the floorboards outside. Kwesi waited, silent and still. ESI, sweating profusely despite the cool air, crept into the room, guided by Akojoa's urgent text message, "Find the file on the west wall, behind the Picasso replica." ESI fumbled with the cabinet, her heart pounding a terrifying rhythm against her ribs. She was hunting for a file that Ajoa had invented, driven by the desire to secure Akojoa's favor and escape the shame of the failed code. As ESI finally pried open the cabinet, Kwesi stepped out from the shadows. "ESI. What are you doing in my study at this hour? Are you looking for the emerald necklace, or something else? ESI froze, dropping the small lock-picking tool. Her betrayal was laid bare, undeniable, and ugly. Kwesi, his face a mask of cold fury, now understood the mechanism of the emerald accusation. It wasn't Ajua who was the thief, it was ESI, acting on behalf of Akosua, using Ajua's identity as a weapon. His suspicion of Ajua immediately evaporated, replaced by a terrible realization: Ajua had been testing him. She had given ESI the false information to expose the true conspirator. The man who scorned betrayal was now married to a woman who had brilliantly orchestrated one to save herself. Kwesi dismissed Kofi and the humiliated ESI, locking the study door before turning to Ajua. She stood by the window, composed, the glow of Accra's neon lights reflecting in her calm eyes. Kwesi didn't shout, his voice was soft, laced with a dangerous understanding. The file didn't exist, did it, Ajua? There was no financial sabotage evidence on the west wall. Ajua turned slowly. I needed to know where ESI's loyalty lay. She delivered my lie to Akosua just as readily as she delivered Akosua's accusations to me. Kwesi moved closer, his gaze intense, stripping away her composure. You exposed the entire scheme. The emerald, ESI, Akosua. But you didn't just defend yourself, you orchestrated a masterful betrayal. You used the very thing I despised, disloyalty, to secure your position. He took her face in his hands, his touch surprisingly tender. I married a cleaner, Ajua, but I have found myself partnered with a lioness. You are more like me than anyone I've ever known. He saw the moment Ajua understood, the 2-year plan was irrelevant. He didn't want to discard her, he wanted to keep her as a prized, dangerous weapon. The 2-year clause in my original will, he continued, a cold smile touching his lips, it was a test. A way to protect myself from gold diggers. You didn't just pass the test, you burned the questionnaire. The revelation that his 2-year threat was a deliberate provocation, and that she had outmaneuvered it, brought a thrilling terror. Ajua shivered, realizing her original plan to escape him was now impossible. She was trapped by his respect. The morning sun, filtered through the silk curtains, felt like a blessing Ajua had finally earned. She lay in Kwesi's arms, their love now honest, stripped of the deceit and test. They spoke of futures, not of business or betrayal, but of building schools in Jamestown, of a life free from the shadow of the past. Kwesi smiled, a genuine, relaxed expression that erased years of calculated cruelty. His revenge against Akosua was complete, his fortune secure for Ajua, and his heart finally at rest. He mentioned a final, complicated surgery he had been postponing, the only vestige of the terrible collapse that had killed his first daughter, a persistent internal injury that only now, feeling whole, he felt ready to face. He kissed her, promising to return in 2 days, joking that he couldn't survive without her terrible, strong Ghanaian coffee. Ajua spent the next 2 days reorganizing his endless library, feeling a joyous lightness. On the evening of the second day, Kofi, Kwesi's loyal security chief, arrived alone. His face was a sheet of grave silence. He carried no bags, only a single, heavy envelope. Kwesi had not survived the procedure, the old trauma, coupled with years of relentless stress, had taken its final toll. The peace he found in Ajua was the last luxury of a man who knew he was dying. Ajua, the poor cleaner, was now the sole beneficiary of an irrevocable trust, infinitely rich, her goal achieved. But in the quiet, empty expanse of the mansion, kneeling beside the Fanta Mont Blanc pen, she realized she had traded the laughter of a full life for the gilded silence of a broken heart. The betrayer was hers alone, she had found love only to lose it instantly to death.